Welcome to the Black Appalachian Coalition's podcast entitled Black Remembering, where we will bring to you the heavy and the hope across the Ohio River Valley. We want to remember who we are, where we've come from. We want to speak to the oral history of what we've done, what we've achieved. We want to speak to the ills that we have experienced while also finding solutions to those problems, those issues. We want to deal with the narrative that has kept us deeply rooted in despair. Now we want to punch through that narrative and stand up and say, we are remembering our Black past, and we are rooted, and we are here to stay. Welcome to Black Remembering. We hope that you find your place, your space, and your voice in this podcast.
Hello, my name is Robert Lewis Hunter. I am the newest narrative organizer for Black Appalachian Coalitions, and this month is going to be specifically targeted towards mutual aid. And as such, I wanted to bring on a good friend of mine and someone in the field doing the work, Miss Unique Dunston. Thank you for being able to come. I know you are really busy with life in general, and I'm happy to have you here.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
If you don't mind me asking first, what got you into the work, and tell us more about Marshall County's Free Store.
Yeah, so the work is what is causing me to ponder because I do so much work, and I don't mean that in a vain way, but I really do so much work. But what brought me to the movement was my lived experiences with growing up in Marshall County, Alabama, as the only Black girl in my graduating class of 2015. And we're talking high school. Marshall County is deeply conservative. And so even if the people around aren't deeply conservative, some of them aren't deeply conservative, the people who are conservatives, their mindset and values have influenced others around them, which is a really powerful thing, right? So even if you didn't vote for Trump, you still think in ways that Trump supporters think in some ways. So, for example, the bootstraps scenario or concept of if you don't have it, it's because it's your own fault and you need to pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. Marshall County is a place that, for the most part, believes that so deeply, but the reality is they themselves don't even have bootstraps, but they'll preach that. And it's like, so doing mutual aid in Marshall County specifically is unique. No pun intended. It's a special place, I'll say that. But going back to my lived experience, I grew up in poverty. I know what poverty smells like, tastes like, feels like, sounds like. And it's expensive. Let's just say that. It's expensive in more ways than one. The toll that it takes on your body physically is one thing, and then emotionally, mentally, and have I mentioned the economic part of poverty, which people tend to only associate with the word poverty and economics of it, but it's so much deeper than that. So growing up here, I didn't have a organization to go to or a person that wasn't my mom or my dad to go to when I was having problems within the school system or even outside of the school system. So it was important for me to give back in a way that my younger self would have appreciated.
That is completely understandable. I too have had similar experiences. I will say, however, I am surrounded by a tad bit more community out of Gadsden. But the same rule applies if everybody's poor. You gotta make something shake, frankly, whether it be strapping together to pay for school lunch debt. But I can understand where that's coming from, and I had to, not had to. No, actually, I'm gonna be hard line on this. There were stuff I had to help with because I could not physically not help people, especially when you know you have the ability to. That's a big one. I don't hold it against someone if they're struggling day to day. They don't know the economic system. They don't know organizing. That's not 100% on them. They don't have the tools. You can teach them. You can show them the tools. But like I was helping a community member less than like 2 hours ago. I wouldn't expect that same community member who's asking for resources to be the one to find and give the resources. That's on me as a responsibility because I have the capability. It's frustrating, especially when mind you, all of this is just your material that doesn't deal with the mental destruction that happens after said material situation, because it's actually putting you in a deeper hole in a lot of cases, because poverty begets anxiety begets depression sometimes, and then mental health care ain't free. And
No.
it's just like, hey man, guess what? You gotta I heard you was doing a little better. Now you're about to hear a squeak squeak from your car or a squeak squeak from your brain saying you need to go see a therapist.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are a lot of aspects, and because we live in Alabama, we don't get a lot of free flowing resources, especially because a lot of our resources are bound up in the state legislature because of our anti home rule thing, where it sounds dumb, but due to the fact that a whole bunch of racist white people in the like 1908, well before I was alive, well before like my grandma was alive, they just said, if too many black people huddle around in a city, they could like change that city. So we're just going to remove any city's capability from ruling itself. If you don't mind me asking, what challenges do you face in specifically mutual aid work, and how have you navigated them? Because I know personally, I done got into a few verbal squabbles with the difference between mutual aid and charity, and somehow it became a turf war with some churches locally, of the weird thing where they're like, hey, you're not like axing them for a 30-minute to an hour Bible meeting or a prayer meeting before you give them pants, before you give them food and they haven't eaten 2 days. I'm like, I feel as if we should be led to give. I don't remember the scripture saying specifically, as I heal your eyes. Do you have copay?
Yeah.
Ooh, I can heal one eye. I can heal one eye.
Yeah. Or I need proof that you live in this city or this county. I need to see your ID. Do you have your children's birth certificates? Like, why does any of this matter? It irks me so badly, and it is the reason why we intentionally run Reclaiming Our Time the way we do when it comes to mutual aid. And what I mean is, if you come to us for help, all we need to know is how many people live in your house. And that's only important because we need to know how much food we need to give you for these next couple days, however long you can make the food stretch. And then also for our annoying data needs. But as far as asking for proof of this or paperwork, it's all so exhausting to people who need help in that moment. And the sad part is, most of the organizations who are requiring all these things are faith based organizations that think and feel like they are doing the work of Jesus. And I'm like, interesting.
Which is funny because it's just like, you know what Jesus wants you to do? He wants you to do this capture real quick.
Oh,
That's what he wanted.
yeah. And it's so bad in Marshall County that, and when I say it's, the proof part of it all, like, prove to me that you're poor, prove to me that you haven't eaten or that you need clothes. There is an organization in Marshall County who requires all these things, this list of things. They will look up your address on Google Maps to see if this is a house that they deem may need food inside. They their director told me that out of her mouth, and I was just like, "Huh. And how is that working out?" And she's like, "Well, I just feel like we need to check cuz we need to be," she says, "good stewards of what God has given us." And we police these resources as if they belong to us. And they don't. Like this
Yeah.
work would not exist without the people needing assistance. So why are we making the people who need assistance jump through these hoops to get the assistance that we say this is the reason why we're here, but yet we're making these people perform to get help?
In part, sadly, I think it's because when you switch out profitability, if you don't deal with the root base issue of what bleeds into whatever work you do, exploitation and profitability, then it just morphs into something else. So instead of money profitability, it's performative slash charity profitability, where they're like, well, we're very specific to make sure we only help the most misaligned. And you're like, hey, man, it just takes in this country, you just need to miss one check for most people. Like 50% of the country, just miss one check. And then you are stuck for 3 or 4 months trying to catch up. And even if they look at their house on, I don't know, Google Maps, number one, a lot of Google Maps is old. They only update it like I think every 3 to 4 years because it's a very large world. But also number two, it don't matter because again, you could have the same issue. Hey, I make $3,000 a month. And you're like, that's great. How much is your mortgage? $2,000. You lost your job. Now all of a sudden you need some food. Now I will say there are some significant, detailing if you want to be very specific. Like but I wouldn't put that around specifically the person needing the resources. I'd put that around specifically like certain resources. Like, this is not the day and time to be giving out 17 carts of eggs. But that is not the receiver's issue.
Yeah.
As a person who's had to run a storefront, that is not their fault at all. And no one should be trying to use that as an excuse. Also, in most situations, like the worst, if I remember correctly, the worst mismanagement or bad use of someone taking advantage of a system's like 10%. Hear me out here. If I lose one carton of eggs over one person scheming for one carton of eggs, but the trade-off is 6 to 10 kids get to eat something that is not ramen noodles for 3 days straight. It goes back to do you value the money of the eggs over children starving?
Mm-hmm.
And for some people, they try to find some flowery words to get around, what was that unity? What's that community reference? I'm okay with children starving, but I draw the line at losing out on some eggs. You okay with the community
Oh,
starving?
I address this often. The whole idea of what if people take advantage of the resources that you're giving to the community? And I always have to remind folks, it's food. If I was out here giving
Houses.
cars, houses, vacations, all right, I may need some paperwork just to make sure I didn't give you a house yesterday. But we're talking food. We all need food. 3 meals a day minimum, not even counting the snacks in between. Like, these are basic needs. And people don't seem to grasp that people who already have what they need in terms of food and essentials aren't going out of their way to leave their warm and cozy or cool and cozy house to get what's already in the house. That's not happening. And if it is, I'm glad you got some extra food. It's food. People treat it
It's not
as
like
if,
something. Yeah, it's not like something that is going to last forever. It's going to last most of the time a week. Now it
if
depends if that, because if it's spring break, your kid's out of school is going to last 2.5 business days.
yep.
But yeah, food is not something that's going to last. I mean, I got a box fan that's going to last longer than its weight in eggs.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm surprised it's lasted this long because that may just be a cultural thing. But sometimes the thing just stays on.
Mhm.
But yeah, it comes from the idea that there's always going to be lesser than, or there are those that are less deserving, so they should get less regardless.
Ooh.
Are there any historical or cultural figures that inspire you along your journey of doing this work?
I am so inspired by Harriet Tubman, and I I think we don't appreciate her enough, along with a whole list of other Black creatives, artists, leaders. But I think about often, like real often, how much of her story was untold. And it feels like we know a lot, but I don't think we can even grasp how impactful her work was. The dedication, the bravery. Mm.
I think that's another great example, specifically when we get into not only helping our immediate family, but helping those, if we have the capability, helping others.
Oh my goodness. It's so important. I can't think about community without thinking about, and mutual aid without thinking about Harriet Tubman. So selfless. She could have freed herself and been like, all right, y'all, see you when you get here, or if you get.
I got some
But
cornbread waiting for you once you once you figure it out.
she went back over and over and over again. And then, you know what I also think about when I think about Harriet Tubman? I think about the people who told her no, that they weren't going. I think about those people so often because I see that same mentality today within our own community. And it's the folks that are complacent. They don't have anything. Nothing to lose. But that complacency, along with the hopelessness of this is just how it is. Mm. If
Or
I knew to touch, reach, pick up those folks, uh,
or dealing with those who feel that they can become the foreman and are operationally against whatever you're trying to do is another big issue, because we're having this conversation right now. We have done organizing work for the past 5+ years. On the top of your head, we'll say 10. How many Black men do you know in organizing spaces that either, number one, have consistently been there, number two, have not pulled no, if I'm not in charge, I'm leaving, or number three, have not instantly tried to say, I'm going to lead the movement, and then they do one leading and then they're done? Or just not even coming regularly to like meetings that have to build out. Like even if you're like, hey man, we're going to have a silent protest over here, but we need to have 2 or 3 meetings about safety and security, about potentially raising bail fund, about potentially talking to other members inside the community, and having a plan for our lawyers if one or multiple of us get arrested. I won't even say 10. I'll say 5. Because I look,
you you can say three.
because one of the things I noticed is it's an internal situation where there are some people like they don't want to break down and repurpose the tools of the master's house. They just want to straight use the tools. No, nothing else. You're like, hey man, the world we're trying to build, shotguns are not going to be as effective as replacing it with a mechanical hose digger. You're like, no, I want the shotgun. You're like, then you're not trying to build the same community, the same world I'm trying to build, and others with me.
Yeah.
Let's be honest here. Let's start with the top op, Clarence Thomas.
Woo.
Look, one of the issues there is I try my best not to make it about one particular person, but about the system as a whole. But when you are and have been arguably the most powerful African American in the country, at least since the 90s, because as a Supreme Court member, you're there till you die, or you choose to give up that power. Sure, there's a president or two that might be more powerful than you for like 3 years. But then once that president runs for re-election, he's dead weight. He can't run a third time. So you outrank him.
Yeah.
So we're talking about a dude that's been one of the most powerful, probably the most powerful minority in the nation, probably for 17 years out of the last 30, if you want to count certain areas where a president was more powerful because they came in with an agenda, or George Bush with 9/11. And he's the one that took away my grandma's rights when it came to protecting her about voting laws in Alabama, Shelby v. Holder. He was the deciding vote, because operationally he does not live, or does not want to live, in the same world. He has classified it as black nationalist, black extremist. But at the end of the day, operationally, extremist mentality is oppressive to anyone outside of that ballpark of power. Because to covet that power is to make sure you cut off any type of resources, or as they put it, the ladder from underneath you.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, me personally, it's been pretty hard to find other black men to like stay, men in general, but stay in the movement, because they can just, some of them sincerely feel as if, number one, because it's resource based, it's a woman's job. They're like, well, yeah, I mean, cooking, cleaning, nursing, materials. That sounds like, are they like hammering things? You're like, some of them build houses, yes. But no, day to day, you have to be nurturing to your community. I don't know about all that nurturing, big dog. Also, these are the same people that they die at 54 because they don't nurture their own body to go see a doctor. I'm built different. Yeah, you are built different. You built with heart failure now.
Ooh, help us. It's the truth.
What advice would you give to younger black creatives trying to make their mark in the work?
This one is heavy for me because I still wrestle with my purpose here within the work, because it's such heavy work. And when you don't have a lot of people standing beside you or willing to get their hands dirty alongside you, it's even heavier. And so I think mental health is huge. And what I didn't realize until recently is, everybody says, like, you can't pour from an empty cup. You need to, pour into yourself. And then once your cup is full, then you can help others. I didn't realize how often I would have to refill my cup. So it's not within the work, it's not like, oh, I just need 3 vacations a year. That's refilling my cup. No, my cup is empty, sometimes daily, because the needs are so great and the people to meet the needs aren't there, or they're burnt out themselves, or now they don't have it. We have all of this stuff with the new administration, the new Trump administration, where federal grants, who knows what's going to happen with that. And so a lot of funders get their money that way to give it to us little guys, per se. And so there's so much that goes into running a nonprofit or doing community work in general. And it's so exhausting. I would say take time for silence. And at first, it's awkward or boring, even. But I find that most of my day is so loud. And maybe I'm just working in my house where it's quiet inside, but in my brain, it's loud and it's not organized and it's ugly. And then there's so many thoughts and to do lists flying around in my head where I have to find some quiet, some peace where my brain is quiet. And so for me, that could be going on a walk with my earphones in, with them out. It doesn't matter. Just finding time where I'm just considering me. Because as organizers, oftentimes we're only considering others, and it's not sustainable, unfortunately. I'm still coping with a lot, but I'm still coping with how much work our community needs. And that's a loaded statement to say, but I think we have gotten too far into the mind your business mindset where it's you're minding your business so much you don't see your neighbors. You don't know their names. You don't know how to get in contact with them if their house was on fire because you've been minding your business. And don't get me wrong, minding your business is also important, but in terms of community, we're losing each other, the care for each other, the love, the nurturing of each other is not there in a way that it should be. And that is what I'm interested in now that I'm a little older of an organizer. I know I'm only 28, but I started this when I was like 23. And I'm so different than I was at 23 now that I'm 28. And so my focus is different. My goals are different in terms of the movement and community work. And to wrap all of that up, I would say my advice to someone who is just getting started in whatever you're doing is find time for you. And like I said, it's going to be a little boring at first, but make it a routine to spend time with yourself before you consider others. And that is so hard to do. It really is. And it feels selfish. And maybe it is selfish, but the alternative is not sustainable. Coming from someone who has battled suicidal thoughts and depression and anxiety, there will come a point where you will hit rock bottom if you don't take care of yourself. So that self-care, and then the second part is studying and learning. And with that, to be frank, shut up sometimes. Just listen sometimes. Take it in, take it home with you if needed, or leave it where it was if needed, because that's also important. But I think sometimes we exhaust ourselves more than we need to because we're already doing so much. And then we get into this discourse or arguments online, and it's like sometimes just leave it there. Really, most times, because if you think about the amount of time we spend online, anyways, whether we're arguing with others or just scrolling, that's valuable time that we could be using to pour into ourselves. And so, yeah, study, listen, be quiet, be comfortable with quietness, with stillness, because there will come a time where it feels like nothing is peaceful or nothing is quiet. So take advantage of it while you can, when you can, wherever you can. It's important.
Thank you. I can understand that because I have been in that situation more than I would like to admit. Frankly, if you're one of the people that is doing a lot of the what I would call in-person care of actually dispensing resources rather than one of the people that's like specifically shipping resources. I would say that the dangerous part of it is a lot of those people a lot of them don't have a homicidal rage snap. They just pass away due to suicidal ideation. I think, if I remember correctly, one whole graduating class of doctors passes away every single year due to the fact of way too much stress on them. And I would go further to also say that I wouldn't even say you pour out of an empty cup. For those who have the grit and capability, you open yourself up and bleed to fill that cup. And at some point, you can't bleed no more.
Yeah.
Now, I will say there's a difference, because don't get me started on Sue Ellen Cobb Waxel III saying, I've emptied my cup. And she did some dishes. On that point, let's talk about what fills us back up. What do you do to instill Black joy in you and your community when things start to get a little down?
I always struggle with this question. It's really hard for me to be joyful or even to pat myself on the back. Like, it's really hard. My family brings me joy, for sure. But also, I think it's such a struggle because the work brings me joy. But it's like, but what do you do when something causes you joy and grief at the same time? It's such a weird thing, but it's true. Like, what I do brings me joy. And in the same breath, what I do wears me down. I think balance is important. Taking breaks when you can. What also brings me joy is the youth in the community. They may not always have the answers to, solve all of the problems. But you know what they do have the answers about? They know what they need, and that's important. They're also willing to help others get what they need, and that brings me hope for the future.
I am happy to hear that. Combo question. And you'll see why it's a combo question in a second. So, how do you balance what it means to be authentic to Black culture, even though the difficulties that come with misconceptions of Black people? Because there have been plenty of times where, hey, we don't think it's appropriate for you to be kikiing with your little friends. You're like, we're on break, Susan. We've been here. We've been working this volunteer thing for 4 hours for free, Susan. I promise you, we have no nefarious intentions over here. We're just trying to find the mental capacity to make it through the day, like you, Susan.
Yeah. Can you repeat the question?
How do you deal with trying to balance being authentically Black with working in and around the challenges and sometimes stereotypes of Black people in your community? Because what I'm trying to frame with this question is, there have been plenty of times where I try to do something out in the community, like, hey, we're going to have a barbecue. It's not going to be a problem. But certain community members find that to be less than eloquent when it comes to charity or mutual aid. You're like, no, I'm having a community event with the community. They have said they wanted hot dogs and hamburgers. Like, I just don't feel that's up to the standards of what I'm expecting. Susan, I know it's not up to the standards because you live in a suburb, Susan. I can't help that the community as a whole is more than just what your perspective is on this.
What helps me being authentic to my Black girl, woman self is the realization that the opinion of the oppressors doesn't change. If I change my hair, their opinion doesn't change. If I come in with notes versus no notes, if I come in business casual versus jeans, they still see me the same. And so what I realized over the years is there's no point in putting in all of the extra work to be and show up as someone that I'm not. Because one, it's exhausting. Two, there's no point. Our oppressors have made up their minds long, 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 long time ago. So when I show up to a city council meeting, to a parent teacher conference, wherever I'm needed in the community, I first keep in mind why I'm there. Who am I there for? 'Cause it's not about me. It's about whoever's having the problem at this home. And so I keep that in mind first. Who am I here for? And then the second thing is, what truths am I bringing with me? Sometimes those truths rub people the wrong way, but I think we do ourselves and a disadvantage when we're showing up unauthentic or not authentic, whichever is the correct way to say that, and with not bringing the truth. Because if we're not doing those two things, then what are we doing? Literally nothing. We're going in circles.
Yeah,
So
and
I
I think that's a part. Sorry, you were saying?
go ahead.
I was just saying I think that's a part of the problem is the whole point is to keep us in a circle rather than breaking the circle, breaking the actual round and round condition. It's one of those situations where the first tenet of white supremacy is comfortability. You should never be made to feel uncomfortable ever, even though uncomfortability is a part of growth. It's a part of challenging the system as it is. But there are plenty of people in powerful positions that are like, whoa, 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 we don't need y'all growing. We don't need y'all challenging any position. It's a us versus them game. And maybe, let's be honest, mostly men, maybe we'll pick some of you to be attack guard dogs. You ain't gonna be in the house. We're gonna make you a little house, and you're gonna pretend it's the best house in the world. But you ain't gonna be in here with us. You'll be eating off our table scraps sometimes.
Yeah.
And for some people, that's all they want. They just want a comfortable life, and they don't want to think about anything or anyone outside of their own personal comfort, blending themselves into white supremacy and into whiteness, regardless of their status or their culture. And it's frustrating because
Yeah.
I've had to nearly fist fight that on so many fronts because there's this thing I jokingly call the bad men's union, where literally they all get together and say, if we're all bad, that is the standard. That is the bar in underneath the earth's crust.
Mm.
If we all abide by that, we're all good. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. Thank you all for listening. This is going to be the end of this episode, and it's been lovely having you, Unique. We're going to bleed over to a next episode. It's not going to be a very long one, but I would like to go over some mutual aid free store 101. Thank you again.